The big question everyone wants to know. Is Hit Boy's dad a snitch? We'll let you be the one to decide. Chauncey Alexander Hollis, better known as Big Hit, will be referred to as the defendant in this paperwork. Defendant Chauncey Alexander Hollis, also known as Big Hit, tried to cash a fake traveler's check using a fake driver's license as identification. At trial, he testified that this was a case of mistaken identity and that the perpetrator was actually his brother. A jury found the defendant guilty of forgery of a fictitious financial instrument. It deadlocked on charges of burglary, forgery, and possession of a forged driver's license, which were eventually dismissed. Defendant admitted 1 year prior prison term enhancement. As a result, he was sentenced to a total of 3 years in prison. The evidence against defendant. A man walked up to a register at the Walmart in Fontana to buy a pair of pants. He said that he wanted to pay with a $100 American Express traveler's check. The check was in the name of Jerry Jones. As identification, he produced a Nevada driver's license in the name of Jerry Jones. The cashier gave both the check and the license to her managers for approval. One manager suspected that the check was a fake. As a result, the police were called. Meanwhile, the cashier asked the man to step aside so she could take care of other customers. He waited for a while, but then he walked out. The Nevada license and the American Express checks turned out to be, in fact, fake. At trial, the cashier testified that the man's hair was in cornrows, and he was wearing a white jersey with stripes. She identified defendant as the man. Still photographs of the transaction were introduced into evidence. Because they were taken by a surveillance camera directly over the cashier's head, the man's face is not clearly visible. However, he does at least resemble defendant. His hair is in cornrows. He is wearing a mostly white short-sleeved shirt with some dark blue vertical stripes. Officer Mario Mancha was dispatched to the Walmart. He had been given a description of a black male suspect wearing a white t-shirt and black pants. As he was walking in, he noticed a man just walking out who matched this description, except that his shirt had stripes. At trial, Officer Mancha identified defendant as this man. As Officer Mancha turned to follow him, the man started running. Officer Mancha chased the man through the parking lot. At times, he lost sight of him. At one point, though, he did see the shirt down around his arms and a wife-beater t-shirt underneath. When Officer Mancha caught up with him, the man was sitting in a vehicle. He was wearing a wife-beater. His hair was in cornrows. 2 women were in the vehicle with him, but they said that they had just met him. Officer Mancha did not try to locate the striped jersey. Officer Mancha arrested the man. He told Officer Mancha that his name was Jerry Jones, but he couldn't remember his birthday. When Officer Mancha searched him, he found 2 more American Express traveler's checks, both with the same serial number as the one given to the cashier. Eventually, the arrestee admitted that he was defendant. Defendant was advised of his Miranda rights. He signed a written Miranda advisal and waiver form. He was handcuffed behind his back and transported to the police station. Officer Mancha then interviewed him. Defendant stated that he had sold some earrings to a stranger in exchange for the license and the 3 checks. He admitted, knowing that these items were fake. Officer Mancha turned defendant over to other officers for booking. At that point, according to Officer Mancha, defendant's hair was still in cornrows. In defendant's booking photo, the hair on the left side of his head is in cornrows, but the hair on the right side of his head is loose, bushy, and unkempt. Defendant's testimony. Defendant testified that he went to the Walmart with his baby mother, Nisha, and her friend, Ebony, and that they later falsely denied knowing him. He stayed out in the vehicle while they went inside. He was wearing a white wife-beater and blue jeans. He claimed that half of his hair was in cornrows. Meanwhile, defendant's brother phoned him. On learning that defendant was at Walmart, defendant's brother said he would come over there to shop. When the brother arrived, they talked for a while. According to defendant, his brother was a split image of him. His brother was wearing a dark blue and white jersey and jeans. At first, defendant refused to give his brother's name. However, when the trial court threatened to strike defendant's testimony, he gave his name as Jeremy. Defendant's brother said, "I'm going to do this lick," meaning to commit a crime, then entered the Walmart. The 2 women returned to the vehicle. They all waited for defendant's brother. Defendant then saw his brother running from the store and Officer Mancha chasing him. His brother ran up to him, asked him to hold the checks, then threw them on the ground. His brother then resumed running. Officer Mancha was still chasing him. Two other officers then showed up at the vehicle and arrested defendant. They retrieved the checks from the ground. Defendant denied identifying himself as Jerry Jones. He also denied being Mirandized. He admitted that the signature on the Miranda form looked like his, but he claimed that it must have been forged. He also claimed that he did tell the police that the perpetrator was his brother. They wanted him to snitch on someone who had guns and drugs, but he refused. Defendant admitted that he had prior convictions for burglary and 2 forgery-related crimes. He claimed that these crimes, too, had actually been committed by his brother. He had pleaded guilty only because his brother had begged him to, so his wife would not divorce him. The evidence of identity. Defendant contends that there was insufficient evidence that he was, in fact, the perpetrator. Here, both the cashier and Officer Mancha identified defendant as the perpetrator. Officer Mancha also testified that the man he arrested, the defendant, gave his name as Jerry Jones, the name that was also on the Nevada license and on the American Express check. Officer Mancha found 2 identical checks on defendant's person. Finally, after defendant was Mirandized, he admitted being the perpetrator. Defendant relies on his own testimony that the perpetrator was actually his brother. At trial, he implied that Officer Mancha was lying, trying to frame him because he refused to snitch. The jury, however, could reasonably conclude that it was defendant, not Officer Mancha, who was lying. Defendant was impeached with a prior felony conviction. Also, he was plainly lying when he denied being Mirandized. His signed Miranda form was in evidence. Defendant even admitted that the signature looked like his. He claimed it was forged, but he did not explain how the police would have known what his signature looked like. There was no other evidence that defendant so much as had a brother. No other members of defendant's family testified. No photograph of a brother was introduced into evidence. Defendant failed to call Nisha or Ebony to corroborate his testimony. Defendant points out that the perpetrator was wearing a striped jersey, whereas he was wearing a white wife beater. Officer Mancha, however, testified that while he was chasing the perpetrator, he saw him in the process of removing the jersey. He saw that he was wearing a wife beater underneath. Even in the absence of such testimony, it stands to reason that defendant could have simply removed and discarded the jersey. Officer Mancha's mere failure to look for the jersey is hardly proof that it was not out there in the parking lot somewhere. As defendant also notes, the perpetrator's hair was in cornrows, whereas his booking photo shows only half of his hair in cornrows. He argues that he was in handcuffs, which would have made it physically impossible for him to undo any cornrows before the booking photo was taken. The record does show that when Officer Mancha turned him over to other officers at the station for booking, defendant's hair was still in cornrows and his hands were cuffed behind his back. There is no evidence, however, of how much time elapsed before the booking photograph was taken, and no evidence that defendant's hands remained cuffed behind his back this whole time. If anything, the booking photo is yet more evidence that defendant was the perpetrator. Obviously, he was trying to change his appearance. This is evidence of consciousness of guilt, and hence of identity. His explanation was unbelievable. Who goes around with only one side of their hair in cornrows? We therefore conclude that there was ample evidence that defendant was the perpetrator.
All right, what's your brother name? Jeremy.
Yeah.
Nigga, ain't no Jeremy, nigga.
Ain't no Jeremy. What you talking about?
You feel me? I sent him on a wild goose chase. You feel me? But I still got found guilty in the end. You feel me, blood? But this nigga, blood, called me. This nigga homie's finna put some paperwork out on you, blood. You snitching and shit. Like, blood, how you gonna snitch on yourself, stupid?
Yeah, it's me.
You know what I'm saying? It's me, dumbass nigga. I just called the homie Bad Mike, nigga. Lil Luck. They like, blood, kill it, nigga. Ain't no you Jeremy, nigga. Everybody know me, nigga. My little brother Wesley, nigga. West Side, nigga. PDL. Yeah. You know, I'm trying to manipulate the system, nigga. Nigga, I was sending police on a wild goose chase, nigga. Yeah, we look just. That's not me though. Yeah, that's my little bro.
So what do you guys think? Did Big hit snitch? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Trappers United media.